The Menendez brothers' parole. Bid, justice, accountability, and redemption. 35 years have passed since the Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle, forever changed the public perception of American family dynamics. Their brutal murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, shocked the nation, and their trial captivated millions with its mix of horror, wealth, and alleged family secrets. Now, decades later, the Menendez brothers' attempt to secure parole raises a storm of new questions. Is justice about punishment alone, or can there be room for redemption, even for murderers? California Governor Gavin Newsom has reignited the conversation by thrusting their case back into the spotlight, calling for a risk assessment to determine whether the brothers should walk free. This twist plunges us back into one of the darkest true crime sagas and forces society to grapple with tough ethical, legal, and moral questions. Are these killers victims of unspeakable abuse, deserving a second chance? Or do their crimes warrant an unrelenting sentence of life in prison? Let's revisit the case, unravel the layers of debate, and consider what their parole might mean for our justice system and society at large. On a chilling August night in 1990, the Menendez family home in Beverly Hills became a crime scene straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Jose and Kitty Menendez were found shot to death, their bodies riddled with shotgun wounds. For months, their sons, Eric and Lyle Menendez, played the role of grieving heirs, seemingly devastated by their parents' brutal demise. But the truth that would come to light was far more sinister. The revelation that the brothers themselves had orchestrated the murders turned the story into one of betrayal and horror. Eric and Lyle confessed, claiming years of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse by their father, Jose, had driven them to an explosive breaking point. When confronted with the possibility of continued abuse and their mother's alleged complicity, they said they resorted to preemptive violence to protect themselves. However, their claims of abuse were hotly contested during a series of high-profile trials. While some sympathized, others dismissed their narrative as a ploy to gain sympathy and escape conviction. In 1996, the final verdict came. Both brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury viewed their actions not as self-defense, but as calculated executions motivated by greed for an inheritance. The court had spoken, yet the public remained divided. Now, after decades behind bars, the Menendez saga has resurfaced with a new chapter. California Governor Gavin Newsom has dramatically inserted himself into this renewed debate. On his newly launched podcast, Newsom announced that he had directed the state parole board to assess whether the Menendez brothers pose an unreasonable risk to public safety. His decision to wade into such a controversial issue raises eyebrows. Why focus on this case that has already been adjudicated and relegated to true crime lore? What political or societal point does Newsom want to make here? Some argue this is a calculated political maneuver to foster a compassionate yet tough image, demonstrating a willingness to scrutinize even high-profile cases under the principles of justice and public safety. Others see it as a move veiled in controversy, perhaps unnecessarily reopening old wounds and reigniting public debate over a settled case. Regardless, Newsom's involvement forces the public to grapple with complex questions about the criminal justice system and society's capacity for forgiveness. Is he simply doing his duty, or is this about more than risk assessments and public safety? Decades have passed since the murders, and the Menendez brothers are not the same young men who once shocked the nation. Reports from prison characterize them as model inmates, mentors, mediators, and productive contributors to the prison community. They've expressed remorse and regularly participate in rehabilitation programs. In an era where restorative justice advocates emphasize the potential for change, does this evidence suggest the Menendez brothers have earned a second chance? Yet such claims rest uneasily against the haunting details of the crime. The image of two young men executing their parents in cold blood lingers as a stark reminder of their chilling capabilities. Does their reported transformation erase that? Should decades of good behavior outweigh the life-altering loss suffered by their victims, their own parents? This is where the parole board's risk assessment will play a decisive role. The board must sift through layers of evidence and determine whether the Menendez brothers can re-enter society without posing a threat. But here's the provocative question: can we ever truly know when someone no longer poses a risk? Or is this ambiguity precisely why cases like these grip public imagination and fear? Few true crime cases evoke the kind of intense polarization that surrounds the Menendez brothers' story. On one side, there are those who believe Eric and Lyle were victims themselves. They argue the abuse allegations provide crucial context, framing the crime as a desperate act committed by broken souls trapped in an unbearable reality. For this camp, the parole request is a plea for compassion and recognition of human resilience. On the other side, the critics are unwavering. They argue the abuse claims, whether real or exaggerated, do not justify murder. To them, the Menendez brothers represent a grievous violation of trust and familial bonds, deserving the maximum penalty as a deterrent to others. How does society reconcile these competing narratives? Social media platforms and true crime forums are now abuzz with heated debates. Should good behavior in prison grant murderers like Eric and Lyle a chance at freedom? Or does the nature of their crimes forever outweigh their attempts at redemption? When it comes to parole, the justice system walks a fine line between accountability and societal safety. The Menendez brothers' case tests this balance like few others. The parole board's charge is clear: assess whether Eric and Lyle, now in their 50s, can reintegrate into society without endangering others. The stakes are high, and the decision will have implications far beyond this singular case. Historically, parole hearings in high-profile cases often become battlegrounds for wider societal concerns. Decisions are as political and emotional as they are judicial. The Menendez brothers' parole raises crucial questions. What message does paroling them send about our justice system's values? Does it prioritize the offender's progress in prison or the gravity of their offense? True crime enthusiasts know one thing for sure: parole decisions in such cases rarely feel satisfying. Whether the brothers walk free or remain behind bars, there are bound to be strong and opposing reactions. If the Menendez brothers are granted parole, it won't just bring up questions of justice. It'll also reopen old wounds about abuse and trauma within families. Their claims of sexual and physical abuse by their father divided public perception during the trial. Some believed them, despite their lack of corroborating evidence. Others dismissed the abuse narrative as manipulative and self-serving. But let's step back for a moment. If their story is true, what does this say about the justice system's ability to handle cases rooted in family trauma? Did the Menendez brothers commit the ultimate betrayal, or were they crying out against a system that failed to protect them? Their case forces us to confront a parallel tragedy: victims of abuse who turn into perpetrators, perpetuating cycles of violence and despair. If nothing else, their parole request underscores the need for deeper societal conversations about abuse, mental health, and the support structures, or lack thereof, available to those at risk. Governor Newsom's decision to weigh in on this case was no accident. In doing so, he injected politics into a deeply personal and judicial matter. By choosing this case for his podcast, Newsom ensured it would spark the interest of true crime enthusiasts, provoke the outrage of critics, and stir the conscience of the empathetic. But what might his real motives be? Some speculate that Newsom's intervention is an attempt to send a message about justice in California. Others wonder if it's a calculated risk to amplify his national profile. What we do know is that this move ensures that the Menendez brothers' case remains not only a part of true crime history, but also an active, evolving legal and cultural debate. As the parole board's risk assessment looms, the Menendez brothers' fate hangs in the balance. Whatever the outcome, this moment will mark yet another pivotal chapter in their long, infamous story. Are they reformed individuals who deserve a second chance, Or are they irredeemable figures who must bear the weight of their crimes until their last breath? For those who follow true crime, their story raises profound questions about human nature, justice, and the lines between victim and perpetrator. For society at large, it forces us to reckon with the ongoing tension between punishment and rehabilitation in our legal system. In a world drawn to simplistic narratives, the good, the bad, the guilty, the innocent, the Menendez brothers' case resists easy categorization. And maybe that's why, decades later, we're still talking about it. Should they walk free? Or does justice demand they remain behind bars? Before we answer, we must confront the uncomfortable truths their story forces us to face.